Every gardener who has tended a compost pile knows the silent battle it can become. You add your kitchen scraps, rake in leaves, layer straw, and wait for the rich, dark humus that should flow back into your soil. But instead of a steaming, earthy heap, you sometimes get a pile that just sits there. It smells sharper than it should, breaks down slower than you hoped, and seems to attract more pests than earthworms. The vision of effortless fertility slips away, leaving frustration in its place. Traditional wisdom tells us to balance greens and browns, to keep the pile damp but not wet, and to turn it for air. Those principles matter, but even when you follow them faithfully, the pile can still stall. The truth is that organic matter does not transform into compost on its own. It is the hidden world of microbes that does the work. Without the right spark, the community of life within the pile never wakes up. That spark comes from a simple, forgotten ingredient that once lived at the heart of traditional gardening and farming practice. The secret lies in something most people would never think twice about: sour milk and other forms of naturally soured dairy. For centuries before bottled microbial inoculants or lab-produced compost starters existed, gardeners used fermentation byproducts to awaken their compost. Old milk, whey from cheese-making and buttermilk, were never wasted. They were poured into the soil or compost heap, where their living cultures of lactic acid bacteria set off a chain of biological fireworks. The science is beautifully simple. Lactic acid bacteria are fast-growing microbes that thrive in moist, organic-rich environments. When added to compost, they rapidly colonize the pile, breaking down sugars, proteins, and starches that would otherwise rot slowly. In doing so, they release compounds that suppress the foul-smelling bacteria responsible for sour odors. They also create conditions that invite heat-loving microbes and fungi to join the process, pushing the compost into that rich, steaming stage where transformation truly takes hold. Instead of throwing out that forgotten milk jug at the back of the fridge, gardeners who understand this old trick see it for what it is: a microbial gift. Accessible, natural, and powerful, this humble ingredient carries the key to compost that springs alive instead of sitting inert. Adding this ingredient to your compost does not require complexity. Think of it less as a food for the pile, and more as a living inoculant. A cup or two of sour milk diluted in a bucket of water is enough to drench a fresh layer of kitchen scraps or leaves. For a larger heap, a quart poured across the top after turning spreads the bacteria evenly. It is best to add the liquid in thin layers rather than in large, undiluted pours. Too much dairy in one spot can turn slimy and attract unwanted scavengers. The goal is not to soak the pile but to seed it. Just as gardeners plant seeds to grow crops, here you are planting a microbial seed that multiplies on its own. The change is often visible within a week. Where the pile may have smelled sour before, it begins to smell earthy. Instead of cold, damp scraps sitting unchanged, the material begins to soften and darken. If you place your hand near the center, you feel the warmth of life returning. The bacteria you added have summoned a diverse cast of decomposers that now work in harmony to convert waste into humus. For those who wish to, really refine the practice, there are ways to take this old wisdom even further. Pairing sour milk with a layer of shredded leaves or straw helps absorb excess moisture, while also giving the microbes a carbohydrate base to feed on. Turning the pile after application distributes the bacteria evenly and helps prevent wet patches. If the compost ever develops a strong dairy odor, it's simply a sign of too much too quickly. Balancing with more carbon-rich browns and adding a bit of airflow will correct it pretty easily. Conversely, if nothing seems to happen, the pile may just be too dry. Moistening lightly brings the microbes back into action. Some gardeners even prepare a concentrated lactic acid culture by fermenting rice water or milk with sugar for a few days. This creates a natural serum that's just teeming with beneficial microbes, and it can be poured onto compost, soil, or even diluted and used as a foliar spray. It's essentially a homemade microbial inoculant crafted from the simplest of kitchen beginnings. What makes this technique so important is not only the compost it creates, but the mindset it represents. You see, in a world where gardening products are often packaged, branded, and sold at high prices, sour milk, well, it reminds us of something deeper. Fertility and abundance have always been rooted in cycles of renewal. Waste becomes life when guided by the right processes. By reclaiming what most households discard, we tap back into a rhythm that sustained gardens long before industrial inputs existed. A compost pile activated with lactic acid bacteria does more than break down scraps quickly. It produces humus alive with microbial diversity. When that compost is added to the soil, the beneficial organisms carry over into the root zone, forming protective partnerships with plants. Crops grown in such soil stand taller, resist disease better, and recover more quickly from stress. This is fertility, not in the sense of pouring nutrients into soil, but in cultivating a living system that nourishes itself and the plants it hosts. Compost is not simply a pile of decomposition, it is the living heart of a garden. Through it, the waste of the household and yard transforms into the foundation of fertility. Yet like any living heart, it sometimes needs a spark to beat strongly. Sour milk provides that spark, waking the unseen workers that turn death into life. Once you begin using this ingredient, the results change how you see compost altogether. No longer is it a chore that takes months of patient waiting. It becomes a dynamic living process you can guide with knowledge. The cycle of growth and return becomes clearer, and your role in nurturing that cycle deepens. The forgotten ingredient that makes compost explode with life is not exotic or costly. It is as ordinary as a jug of milk left a little too long in the fridge. Yet within that simplicity lies a timeless secret. By reclaiming this practice, we step into the tradition of gardeners who understood that fertility is built not on products but on processes, not on chemicals but on communities of life. For those serious about building soil that lasts, this method is a treasure. It restores microbial richness, accelerates decomposition, and gives plants a living foundation from which to thrive. And most importantly, it reminds us that gardening is not about imposing control, but about supporting the natural cycles already at work. If this guide has given you something valuable for your own gardening journey, remember to subscribe to Botanical Bliss, and share this with others who care about building soil the natural way. The secrets of the past are not gone, they are waiting to be remembered, and together we can bring them back to life in our gardens.